It's the final running back tier list of the year, fellas. Week 17 is here, which means you guys are in your fantasy football championships, and I'm going to give you everything I got to help set your fantasy football lineups today at the running back position. As I said last week, any comments, I will try and answer as many as I possibly can. Our weekly rankings manifesto is free this week in case you are curious about some start-sit decisions. You can get that link down below in the pinned comment. But let's get right into the top 36 running back rankings, starting with injuries. Because this is Friday that I'm releasing this, I do have to do a little bit of prognosticating here. We do have a number of guys that are banged up, could play, could not play, so on and so forth. Let's start with the guys that are probably going to be out, if not already out. Kenneth Walker moved to IR with an ankle injury. Zach Charbonnet started in last night's baseball game because the score was 6-3. Kenneth Walker, of course, you would not have had him this week, and Charbonnet was the starter. Alvin Kamara likely out this week again, according to some Saints reporters. They're saying he's rehabbing from the groin injury. Rizzi said he has a better shot to play in week 18. I don't know why they wouldn't shut him down altogether, but he's a competitor. He wants to play regardless. I think he's going to be out yet again, and Kendre Miller probably the starter for another week. Gus Edwards already ruled out for Saturday's game versus the Patriots, and J.K. Dobbins, who was activated off of IR the last day or two, the last couple days, is listed as questionable after practicing a decent amount this week. The Chargers are optimistic that J.K. Dobbins will play this week because of the knee injury that he suffered. A lot of fantasy docs weren't expecting him to go to IR, so it looks like they were very cautious with him, knowing his history of knee injuries. They let him recover fully, and it looks like he could be coming back this week, according to Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated. He had a good week of practice, and the team is optimistic that he'll play. So I have included him in the tier list here. Kamani Vidal truthers will probably have to wait a little bit. James Conner, limited practice all week with the knee injury. Albert Breer also listing him as expected to play, and a lot of other sources have confirmed that. Trey Benson, the other Cardinals running back, his status is up in the air. So if Conner plays, he might actually have a huge workload. He, of course, has been the skeleton key to Best Ball Mania so far this year, having 3 straight games of top 5 performances. Tyrone Tracy did not practice Wednesday, did not practice Thursday with an ankle injury. He is expected to practice today, according to Brian Daboll. That news just dropped about a couple minutes ago before I recorded this. He's probably going to play, if I had to guess. He'll probably log a limited participation today. Any updates I'll leave down below, but I have included him in the tier list because I do expect him to play. Isaac Guerrero, I'm also expecting to play as well for the 49ers. He was limited in practice with the foot/hamstring injury on Thursday, and remember, they are playing on Monday Night Football, so his Thursday practice is really his Wednesday practice, the first practice of the week, so that is good that he is already practicing in a limited capacity. If he gets up to full today or full tomorrow, I'm sure he is going to be ready to go for Monday Night Football. If you do have Guerrero, I think at the very least you can wait until Sunday to evaluate and have more information on whether or not you'll have him for this week's games. Tony Pollard, no practices Wednesday, no practices on Thursday. My estimate is for him either to not play or to play limited. As we saw from him, he is capable of going without practice. He's done that a couple times so far this year, but when he's done that, he did not exceed 45% of the snaps in either of the last 2 games. Tajay Spears actually out-touching him last week. I would plan to start Spears of the 2 options if you have both of them, and I have Spears ranked higher in the tier list as well. And as I talked about already, Trey Benson up in the air to play per Albert Breer, all limited practices. I would expect him to probably play given that, but we'll have to wait and see what happens there. And as I kind of made reference to, Conner, Tracy, Guerrero, Dobbins, all in the tier list because I do expect them to go. With Tony Pollard, I have ranked outside of my top 36 because I do think he will be limited to some degree. Updates will be posted in the pinned comment, and a reminder, like I said, all of our rankings are free this week, so at any point you can always go check the weekly rankings manifesto. I update my rankings daily, and then Saturday I'll definitely have an update before the games kick off. Sunday I will definitely have an update before the games kick off as well. So getting into the locked-in running back starts, my running backs 1 through 12 this week, of course, all in your lineup. If you have any of these players, make sure you are starting them. But some of the guys with good matchups this week, we have Bucky Irving versus the Panthers, who of course had his breakout game against them. Breece Hall versus the Buffalo Bills, a great matchup. Zach Charbonnet last night's baseball game against the Chicago Bears was a good matchup, but didn't quite get a monster performance there. Jonathan Taylor versus the Giants is a smash spot. Jahmyr Gibbs versus the 49ers, Kyron versus the Cardinals, and Saquon versus the Dallas Cowboys. Some of the high-scoring game environments to pay attention to if you have these running backs. You have Jahmyr Gibbs versus the 49ers in a 50.5-point over-under game. Chase Brown versus the Broncos. That one's a pretty high-scoring one as well. Bucky Irving versus the Panthers. Josh Jacobs versus the Vikings. Of course, our BBM 5 team in the finals really needs a big game out of him. Kyron Williams versus the Cardinals, Bijan versus the Commanders, Derrick Henry versus the Texans, and Breece Hall versus the Buffalo Bills. And then elite running backs who have a little bit worse matchups this week, so temper expectations for Josh Jacobs. Again, I'm really hoping he has a big game. Derrick Henry, of course, already played against the Houston Texans. That was a tough matchup for him, but he did perform at a pretty high level. Devon Achane versus the Cleveland Browns, also not an easy matchup, but he should be able to get there. Bijan versus the Commanders, and Chase Brown versus the Broncos on Saturday. So getting into the actual tier list, we're going to start off with the high-end RB2s, as I've done 17 times so far this year. We're going to go 6 running backs at a time, breaking down usage, breaking down what I think of them this week. I'll try and rationalize why I have them ranked where I do. And again, final updates to the rankings will be linked down below in the pinned comment. James Cook versus the New York Jets is my RB13 as of now. They are 11th against fantasy running backs. He's not getting a great workload right now, but a very high-scoring game environment for the Buffalo Bills. 46.5 point over-under. They're implied for most of that. Breece Hall shouldn't have much of an issue moving the chains on the other side of that game, too, so I do think the Jets will be able to score some points as well. 3 of his last 4 games, James Cook has rushed for over 100 yards, and he's done so on 14 or less carries. He's been extremely efficient, averaging over 7 yards per carry in 3 of his last 4 games. Efficiency is very wild of this Bills offense in general. James Cook hasn't exceeded 15 opportunities since week 10, yet he's the RB7 over that stretch, and he is barely getting over a 40% snap share over the last month or so, and he has 19.5 PPR points per game. So just an incredible amount of efficiency from James Cook. I worry that we're going to get another stinker like he put up against the Rams in week 14. He only had 4.9 PPR points, but he's been really, really good the last couple of weeks. Also been one of those skeleton keys to Best Ball Mania that we've seen so far. Running back 14 for me is Aaron Jones versus the Green Bay Packers. Of course, a revenge game for Aaron Jones. 15th against the run, 48 point over-under, and they're at home this time. The Vikings actually played on the road last time they played against the Packers. He had 27 touches, almost 150 total yards the last time they faced. He is a must-start in this matchup. This game is so critical for Minnesota as well, because if they win this game and the Detroit Lions lose on Monday Night Football to the 49ers or drop a game in Week 18, the Vikings go from the 5 seed all the way up to the number 1 seed in the NFC if Detroit stumbles this week. So Minnesota going to be heavily motivated to win this game. And of course, if they lose this game, the Packers can maybe start to climb their way back up to that number 5 seed, and the number 1 seed would be locked up by the Detroit Lions. So I really think that the Vikings are going to be able to put up a lot of points in this one. I think this game could get really, really high scoring. A little bit of that is copium because we do have a mega onslaught. Jordan Love, Dontavian Wicks, Josh Jacobs on the Green Bay side on our Best Ball Mania team. And we have TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, and Jordan Addison on the Vikings side. So we need a big scoring game here, and I do think we will get that. Hopefully it does not run through Aaron Jones for our sake, but I do think we're going to get a lot of point production regardless. So running back 15 locked into my rankings on Wednesday was Joe Mixon versus the Baltimore Ravens. They were 10th against the run entering the game. Mixon's 3rd bad game in a row on Christmas Day, so unfortunately Mixon probably got you guys to the playoffs, but didn't do a whole lot once you got there. 5.9 PPR point performance in a spank fest versus Baltimore that had the Texans scoring only 2 points, 0 on offense. I had him low in my rankings at RB15 for this reason. The Texans are basically just a sitting duck right now, and they were able to be had by the Baltimore Ravens. So not great for Joe Mixon. Hopefully you guys can recover if you had a bad performance so far. RB16 in my rankings is Chuba Hubbard versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The last time that these two teams played, Chuba Hubbard actually lost Carolina the game. He fumbled the ball in overtime. The Bucs went down the field and kicked the game-winning field goal. Hubbard just gets an elite workload. He's been over 80% of the snaps in 4 of his last 5 games, with 79% in the only one that he missed. And the Bucs have quietly shut the door on a bunch of running backs the last couple of weeks in order since Week 10. They shut down Christian McCaffrey, Tyrone Tracy, Chuba Hubbard himself, Gus Edwards, and Rico Dowdle. The only running back that had like moderate success against them was Sincere McCormick in Week 14 versus the Raiders. I'm still starting Chuba Hubbard, but it could be tough sledding. The Bucs run defense, now that it's healthy, is playing at a super, super high level. Although the Panthers made this game really close the last time, it's possible that this game isn't nearly as close because it is in Tampa as opposed to in Carolina like the first game. So running back 17 in my rankings is James Conner versus the Los Angeles Rams. I already talked about him in the injury section, but basically he is expected to play. Trey Benson, kind of a game time decision. James Conner, so far, skeleton key to Best Ball Mania. He's the number 1 rostered running back on the 539 remaining teams competing for that 1.5 million up top, including being on mine, Danny, and Spicy Hot's team that we're all sharing here. That was Best Ball Mania draft number 3. If you guys want to go watch us draft that team, we drafted it on May 20th live on the channel. James Conner is at a higher risk for re-injury given the injury that he's entering the game with. Sounds like a PCL sprain. It makes me nervous for championship week, but this game has a 48-point over-under. Don't hold off on starting the guy whose son ran you to this point. Unless you have a really, really good option, you got to play James Conner, even if he is somewhat questionable coming into the game in this Week 17 championship. So, closing out this tier, we have Tajay Spears versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I will move him higher than this if we get word that Tony Pollard is going to be out. But I am kind of projecting that Tony Pollard will play, but be limited. And that's why I have Tajay Spears ranked at RB18. He'd probably be like RB13, 14, 15 for me if I knew that Tony Pollard was out. Jacksonville is so bad against the run. They allow 30 opportunities combined to opposing running backs with 100 running back targets allowed this season. If Tajay Spears is alone in this backfield, again, he's also been extremely good for Best Ball Mania playoffs and also just for playoffs in general. 2 straight games of a top 10 performance. He is also on our team, so I'm really hoping he has a monster game. And Tony Pollard ideally would just be out for this one, but if you have Pollard and Spears, I would prefer to start Tajay Spears knowing that that Pollard is coming in banged up. Low-end RB2s, the next tier of running backs that we're going to talk about here. We have Brian Robinson versus the Atlanta Falcons at RB19. 7th-ranked defense against the run. Brutal game last week, but the Eagles are impenetrable up the middle. Still, having 2 fumbles last week is definitely not what you wanted to see. Hopefully, Brian Robinson can bounce back. I am an honorary Commanders fan this week because I'm hoping the Atlanta Falcons lose this game on Sunday Night Football because the Bucs need them to lose in order to make the fantasy or the real-life NFL playoffs there. So I think Daniels and the offense can get quite a bit done versus this Falcons defense, and that includes Brian Robinson, who has had 2 really good games in a row as far as a workload is concerned, but Week 15 a lot more than Week 16 was he efficient on his touches and actually getting the work that you want to see there. So running back 20 for me in my rankings is Jerome Ford versus the Miami Dolphins. They are 26th against the fantasy running back position, and when I look at Jerome Ford, I'm like, okay, great workload last week, 79% of the snaps, but I don't know about you guys, but I don't trust Dorian Thompson-Robinson in my fantasy championship at all. Like, I get Jerome Ford as a great play this week, and he has these massive breakaway runs, but if you take away those big breakaway runs in Week 15 and in Week 16, you're probably not looking at a guy who's, such a smash play like you might be looking at him right now. I know maybe I'm overthinking, but I don't think he's a smash in a matchup where his quarterback is just not going to move the ball on offense. They had like 13 passing yards before halftime last week, and I do really think the Dolphins defense is going to clamp them down on the outside and be able to tune in and focus in on the run. So even though they're 26th against the run here, I don't love Jerome Ford as just this automatic top 15 play because he's getting the volume and because he's performed well and been really good the last 2 weeks. I got him RB20 because he scares me. So if you do have better options, I do think you can sit him, but he's probably in your lineup given how good he's been. RB21 in my rankings is Rachaad White versus the Carolina Panthers. They're 32nd against the run. The Carolina Panthers versus running backs equals the single season NFL rushing record. That is right. Running backs against Carolina, if you add them all up together, have over 2,100 rushing yards against this team, and the season isn't even done yet. They still got 2 more games to play. There is enough room here for both Bucky Irving and Rachaad White to cook this week. If you're scared to play Rachaad White because Bucky is back healthy, don't be, because the Bucs are going to really hammer the run game this week. I do expect this game to not be as close as the first time that they played Carolina because it is in Tampa. We got a little bit healthier this time around, and I do think that Rachaad White and Bucky Irving going to do a lot of damage in this game. So running back 22 for me is Rico Dowdle versus the Philadelphia Eagles. They're 2nd against the run. Dowdle facing the defense that has basically stymied every running back they've gone against. Only the Vikings, Chiefs, and Lions have allowed less total yards to running backs. We're talking less than 75 rushing yards and less than 40 receiving yards per game to the whole position. Only 5 touchdowns allowed to the running back position as well is the best in the NFL. In fact, 2nd place has allowed 8. So it's not even close. The Eagles have been one of the best fantasy run defenses in the league.
their nails. This game environment is not great as well. It doesn't look like Jalen Hurts is going to start for the Philadelphia Eagles on the other side of the ball. The bright side, I guess, would be that because they're going to Philly, this game stays like a close game script, and maybe Cooper Rush and the Cowboys can pull this one out. But regardless, I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of production out of Rico Dowdle, and with no CeeDee Lamb on the outside, how good does this offense really look with Rico Dowdle running the ball, with Jalen Tolbert and Brandon Cooks trying to be the ones to get separation? I just don't think they're going to perform at a super high level. So running back 23 in my rankings is Isaac Guerendo versus the Detroit Lions on Monday Night Football. They are 5th against fantasy running backs. Guerendo already practiced once this week, which is what I talked about in the injury section. That is looking good for his status on Monday Night Football against the Lions, because on Thursdays, if you're playing on Monday Night Football, that is actually your first practice of the week. Last time we saw him, he posted back-to-back top 24 weeks. In a short week, when he was banged up in week 15 against the Rams on Thursday night, he still had a decent game. And then 2 weeks before that, he did have a monster game in week 14 where he was able to score twice. So this matchup is not good for the run, but the over-under is in the 50s. So if Guerendo is active and he's ready to go in this one, I know Detroit is probably implied for most of those 50-point over-under points, but the 49ers should still be able to move the ball regardless, and they're going to have to try and score to keep up. So I still like Guerendo in either case. Running back 24 for me is Tyrone Tracy versus the Indianapolis Colts. They are 23rd against fantasy running backs. As I talked about already, Tyrone Tracy is banged up with an ankle injury, but he is expected to practice today, Friday, with that ankle injury, and he should play on Sunday based on that report. Teams run the ball the second most against Indianapolis. They are one of the bigger run funnel defenses in the league versus any other team in the NFL. 25.5 carries per game and 6 targets per game. Only the Carolina Panthers are allowing more touches per game to the running back position than the Indianapolis Colts. Everybody likes to run the ball, throw the ball to their running backs against this team. Tracy has low-key been really bad as far as efficiency-wise on the ground, but this is a matchup that he can get a little bit better because he has not been facing the easiest of defenses the last couple of weeks. So moving into the next tier of running backs, we have RB25 for me, Ramondre Stevenson versus the Los Angeles Chargers. They're 8th against the run. Stevenson has been a victim of game script at times. His usage has been a little bit inconsistent, but last week that wasn't really the case. The Bills got behind early, and the Patriots were actually keeping it close in the first half, and then the second half, the Patriots kind of got wiped off the scoreboard, and they just kind of stopped using Ramondre Stevenson. The Chargers, though, do have this unique ability to turn pretty much anything into a close game, so even though they're a playoff team, they should take care of the New England Patriots easily. This game will probably still be 17-14, so I don't mind Stevenson to get 20-plus touches in this one. So if you do need a good running back option that's going to get the volume, I think Stevenson is a pretty good one this week. Running back 26 for me is DeAndre Swift versus the Seattle Seahawks. He locked into my rankings, of course, on Thursday night. 6-3 was the final score of that game, so nobody really had a great fantasy performance, but 12.1 PPR points in a game that only had 9 total points scored on either side is not too bad for DeAndre Swift. So he actually had a half-decent game versus a pretty good matchup. RB27 in my rankings is Travis Etienne versus the Tennessee Titans. They are 16th against fantasy running backs. Etienne has been getting a lot more work than Tank Bigsby as of late. I like this matchup for Jacksonville because you're at home, you're playing an equally inferior team to you. Both the Titans and Jaguars are complete tire fires waiting for the season to be over. So give me Travis Etienne in a decent spot to score his usual 10 to 15 points per game. Maybe he finally decides to do something more than that. I don't know. He's a fine flex play regardless. Actually has a half-decent little ceiling this week. We haven't seen him really break off any runs, and it could happen in Week 17. It wouldn't totally shock me, but regardless, I think we're probably moving on to RB28 here. Kendre Miller versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Kind of a similar case here. Kendre didn't have a chance to show what he had on Monday Night Football, and I do think Kamara will be out for this game because Green Bay just absolutely blew them out of the building. It was, 14-0 after the 2 drives that Green Bay played on offense. There is some positive hope here because Green Bay is not the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Las Vegas Raiders stink. Very different from Green Bay as far as contending status, just as bad of a team as New Orleans is. And also, you have Chris Olave coming back to practice. Maybe he's going to play in this game. Maybe he's not. Maybe they're just getting him back to practice and they're going to play him in Week 18, or maybe they're just seeing to make sure he's clearing protocol for next year. I don't exactly know what's happening there, but if he does play in this game, that leaves, it a little bit easier boxes for Kendre Miller because you got a real threat on the outside at that point in time. So running back 29 for me is Isaiah Pacheco, who locked in to my rankings here. Another dusty performance from Pacheco. Kareem Hunt has outscored him in 3 straight games. Hopefully you benched him. I did mention that he scared me quite a bit on Tuesday's Matchups That Matter video when I broke down the first 6 games of the slate. 1.8 PPR points. Yuck. Prayers up if you guys ended up starting him. Running back 30 closing out this tier is Jaylen Warren, who also played on Wednesday versus the Kansas City Chiefs. He had a solid game. I'm glad I ranked him over Najee Harris, who I have ranked at RB32, who locked into my rankings. And I did have him a little bit higher because I thought the matchup bode well for Jaylen Warren more so than Najee Harris. But regardless, I actually ended up probably having Warren a little too low because he had 16.2 PPR points in that game. RB31 for me. J.K. Dobbins versus the New England Patriots. Like I said, he is probably coming back this week. I might end up moving him higher than this because according to Albert Breer, he is expected to play, and Dobbins suffered an MCL injury that probably normally wouldn't have required a 4-week absence, but it appears they were very cautious with him, trying to preserve him for the NFL playoffs. He should be good to go, and I actually feel pretty good that he'll get 70 to 90% of his pre-injury workload, especially without Gus Edwards this week, but that could come back to bite me. I get if you don't want to make the risk or take the risk on J.K. Dobbins in your fantasy title game, you should probably have better options anyways. But if you lost a player to injury, say Kenneth Walker or whatever, and you see J.K. Dobbins on your bench or on your waiver wire or something like that, I do think you could do worse than putting him into your lineup against a bottom 10 run defense for a guy that was performing as a top 15 running back before his injury. Running back 32 locked into my rankings was Najee Harris, like I said. Top 5 run defense for Kansas City. 10 points is definitely not bad. I was very worried, which is why I buried him in the rankings. RB33 in my rankings is Alexander Mattison versus the Saints. I mean, he's back for some reason. Ew, but true. 15.6 PPR points, playing a majority role in that game. Should be pretty close. Bottom 6 run defense. Like I said, the Saints and Raiders are both equally dog shit at football. So maybe that game stays close just by necessity because neither team is very good. RB34 in my rankings, playing tomorrow versus the Cincinnati Bengals in one of the more crucial games for the AFC playoff seeding. You have the 22nd ranked Bengals, the Javonte Williams not getting a great workload. He's been super annoying all year. I don't love him this week because Estime is getting more hype, more praise, and more touches as the weeks go along. But Javonte Williams technically is my highest rated Broncos running back if you had to play one. And this game does have a pretty high over-under at 49.5. So you could talk me into playing Javonte for that reason. RB35, Tank Bigsby. I mean, he's going to get 10-plus touches in a close game. He's worth a swing, but you probably aren't coming in first place in your fantasy league if you have to start Tank Bigsby in the final. And then my RB36 was Kareem Hunt, who I said already outscored Pacheco again. So going forward, I probably will be less enthusiastic about Pacheco, a little bit more enthusiastic about Kareem Hunt heading into playoff best ball time. Speaking of, head on over to Underdog, start drafting playoff best ball teams. It is the single best way to get in on the NFL playoffs. If you guys are Raiders fans or Giants fans or team that is not making the playoffs, you won't have a rooting interest in the playoffs to begin with. But if you do playoff best ball drafts, basically all you're doing is stacking up teams you think will make a deep postseason run. There's obviously additional nuance, additional strategy to that. I have my playoff best ball master sheet. So if you want to start drafting right away and you're worried, oh, what happens if this team plays that team in the next round? I got you covered on that. I'm going to be doing a big update to it later today, and I'll drop that down below in the description of this video. So if you want to do some playoff best ball drafts, you can build out some teams like this one. You can see here I stacked up the Detroit Lions to go far in the Super Bowl. I stacked up the Buffalo Bills to go far in the Super Bowl into this game as well. And it's a very, very fun way to get yourself some skin in the game, especially if your favorite team did not make the playoffs. So if that interests you, that'll be linked down below in the description, underdogfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE to sign up for up to $1,000 in bonus cash. You deposit, $100 to play some playoff best ball drafts. You'll get rewarded with an additional 50 insight credit to check out over there. And also, you'll get this free square special pick for the Sunday main slate. So if that interests you, that is linked down below in the description. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. We do have tons of content going on over on flockfantasy.com. Our trade value chart is getting updated. If you guys are Dynasty players, we're going to start as soon as this week is over. We're starting to get into Dynasty rookie stuff. We're going to break down what we did well this year. We're going to break down playoff best ball stuff. The content is not going anywhere just because the NFL season is coming to a close, especially as it pertains to fantasy. But the Dynasty rookie season is going to be in full swing very soon, and our Dynasty rookie draft guide will be here before you know it. So if you want to sign up over on flockfantasy.com, promo code FSE, 7 days for free, 30% off, 6 months for free if you sign up annually. If you signed up annually, that would cover you all the way until the end of next year. So you'd get the Dynasty rookie cycle, you get the Dynasty rookie draft cycle, you'd also get all of our draft guides, you'd get next year's redraft guide, next year's in-season content, tons of value over there if you guys want to sign up and check it out. So link down below in the description for that. And also one final reminder, our weekly rankings manifesto is free this week. So in the pinned comment, you can get access to all my weekly rankings as they change. You'll see the updates and you should be ready and set to win your fantasy football titles. Let's bring it home this week, fellas. Good luck. Peace out. And I'll talk to you soon.